Andrew, thank you very much for patiently waiting by a lot of tech issues at our end. How are you analyzing the market right now? Andrew, I remember last time when we met, you were making a case or you were just about to start a fresh fundraising at one of your funds overseas. How are you going about approaching the market now? Did you manage to raise some funds? What's the strategy? Andrew, can you hear me? How are you approaching the market right now? What's the analysis of what's happening around?
I can't hear you.
Oh, so we still have a tech issue coming in. I'll try to make it slightly louder. Andrew, I want to understand from you. Right. I think it's extremely difficult to get along to Andrew right now. Meanwhile, the markets. Okay. So what's your strategy right now? How are you looking at the market, Andrew? Andrew, can you hear me?
I can't hear you because your voice is crackling.
Andrew, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you very clearly.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I can hear you very clearly now. If you could repeat the question.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. How are you analyzing the market right now?
So I think there's two ways to think about it. One is obviously, the optimism towards maybe a slow kind of get back to work, globally. But I think the optimism around being a 3-month kind of scenario is really not going to play out like that. I think it's going to take longer. And I think what we're going to have to factor in now is how bad the earnings are going to be, and I think we'll start to see that from globally and locally in the next few weeks. And I don't think it's going to paint a pretty picture. If I just take India, for example, I think forecasts were still around, a positive 10%. It just can't be that way. It's got to be a lot lower. In probably minus 10% is the earnings growth for this year. And you're hearing it now increasingly from companies, that they're struggling to get their distribution ready. And even if you start a phased, kind of increase in capacity, and let's just take the auto sector, let's say they go to 25%, which some of them said, are they going to go with prices which, was before the lockdown, or will they have to give discounts? So I think all of these things have not been factored in by analysts yet, and therefore I think the negativity in terms of what we've been expecting is going to start to cloud those kind of more optimistic views in the next few weeks. So, and I think the other big thing, and we're seeing it all across now in the banking sector, in terms of the the narrative coming from some of the major banks and NBFCs, is that there hasn't yet been another package for industry on the fiscal side, and I think that's I've said before, it's all about cash flow. And if you're not getting cash flow for working capital, and you're getting no sales at the top line, then there's only one way you're kind of heading, and that's to kind of cutting costs, cutting people, and maybe having to shut parts of your business. So that's kind of a gloomy outlook, and I'm sure you don't, is not what we would be expecting. But the longer this goes on, the more damage it damages the economy, not just for India but globally.
Right. Andrew, for investors who are still sitting on some amount of liquidity, what would you advise to them? Is it time to start looking at the market in a staggered fashion positively?
You can with, some, individual stocks which you really feel, over a very long period of time will do well. But, there's no harm in sitting on cash for a little bit longer because, as I tried to point out, it's not going to be a 3 month or, it's probably more of a 6 month problem. Until we get a vaccine, I think, the problems for, markets and the economy is going to remain for some time. Let me give you an example. There's some forecasts put out, say, for Germany, saying that the GDP would fall 9% in the second quarter and then kind of recover in the second half towards 4%. But the year after, they're only looking at a 5% kind of increase. So, that's the kind of damage that's being done. And you're not going to get that V-shaped recovery. So I think there's time to wait. Markets will retest, I think, not just in India, but globally, we'll probably at some point retest those lows because the packages being put in place are for really a 3 month period, not a 6 month period. And until that comes through, let's say, for example, the US, they put now $4 trillion, which is 20% of GDP. Most forecasters are now saying that the second quarter GDP will be anywhere between -30 to -40 at the worst case. So it's still not enough. So you're going to have to see more and more packages coming through. But I think the damage to companies and cash flows is something that I don't think the market's really kind of absorbing. We're looking more at the packages, which will help, but it doesn't mean that businesses will pick up back to normal over the next 3 months.
Andrew, how prolonged, in your view, could the recovery be globally as well as in India, looking on the fundamental side?
So I think, I'm kind of, the V-shaped recovery, I don't think it will happen. I think you'll get a spurt of spending once we kind of get out of our lockdown. But, apart from essential goods, it's not going to be big ticket items. It might be other stuff that we've just been missing or would want to buy in the very short term. But I think we'd be wary about, buying anything big because I think there's going to be insecurity about, whether you're going to have a job, whether the industry you're in is what kind of downturn is it going to feel. So I think people would save more. I think they'll put more money towards health. So that means it's more of a U-shaped recovery. I'm kind of, that's where I am. I mean, there are people out there saying it could be more of an L-shaped kind of depression type kind of comeback, and I'm not really in that camp at the moment. I think it's more between a U, I keep using lots of the alphabet, a U or a W actually, in terms of you could see a spike up in terms of optimism, demand, and then it falls again before picking up. So it's not going to be anything before 2021, that's for sure.
Right. All right. I'm afraid we are out of time on this show, Andrew. I would have loved to have slightly longer conversation with you, but limitations because of some tech issues today. I assure you we'll have you back soon on the channel. Thank you very much for your time today. That
Thanks.
was Andrew Holland of Avendus, a veteran who's seen many a cycle as far as market go.